A mysterious disease is coming up and a lot of experts agree that it can be a biological weapon. It is called Havana syndrome, and this sickness affects people who work in specific departments such as US embassies and the spies who work for United States. Nobody knows the origin of the disease. The United States government intends to make 2021 the year it begins to answer unsolved mysteries such as UFOs and the Havana syndrome. Recently, the US Senate unanimously passed legislation to support American public servants who incurred brain injuries from Havana syndrome. It is a very deadly illness, and many specialists feel that other rival countries are behind this illness. Since President Joe Biden took office in January, the sickness has resurfaced and it is much more severe now. The CIA has admitted that it is a major threat. The man in charge of the Osama bin Laden assassination has now been appointed by the CIA to unravel the mystery. Havana syndrome is a strange illness that first appeared in the US Embassy in Havana, Cuba in 2016. The embassy is a 6-story structure near the sea which was built in 1953. Andre Lee, a foreign service officer in her late 40s, is allegedly the patient zero of Havana syndrome. Other diplomats and employees began to experience unusual symptoms such as hearing loss, dizziness and other neurological disorders. Majority of the people who suffer from Havana syndrome claim that it begins with them hearing strange noises from unknown sources. For example, like this. Even after 4 to 5 years, many people suffering from the Havana syndrome are unable to return to their normal lives and work. The brains of 40 original patients from Havana were studied using modern MRIs by specialists at the University of Pennsylvania's Center for Brain Injury and Repair. They found no traces of physical impact on the patient's skull, but they did find signs of brain injury. FBI initiated its own investigation into the events in Havana, but officials have uncovered no conclusive evidence of any attacks so far. And without questioning the Havana patients directly, independent researchers did their own assignments. They came to the conclusion that they were suffering from mass psychogenic disease, which is a condition in which a group of individuals believe that they have been exposed to something dangerous and all become unwell at the same time. And this mass psychogenic sickness and the Havana syndrome is based on a delusional belief. But the doctors at University of Pennsylvania who examined the initial cases of the Havana syndrome say that many of the patients didn't know that the other people were also sick, and their bodies couldn't have faked some of the physical signs that they were displaying. As a result, these doctors ruled out the possibility of a widespread psychogenic illness. While the symptoms have predominantly hit Americans, several Canadian officials have also reported experiencing Havana syndrome. In 2017, Havana syndrome affected a small number of Canadian diplomats and intelligence officers as well as their families. In 2019, the government of Canada announced that it was reducing its embassy staff in Havana after few serious cases. Several Canadian ambassadors sued the Canadian government in February 2019, alleging that it failed to protect them or respond quickly to major health issues. CSIS, which is Canada's intelligence agency, is also investigating the cause of the sickness. And the obvious accusations were directed at Cuba at first. In 2017, Donald Trump accused Cuba for perpetrating unspecified attacks causing these symptoms. Americans reached out to Cuban authorities. Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez, on the other hand, said that the US has provided no evidence for their claims and the US diplomats in Havana have been subjected to a deliberate attack, raising the question of whether the Trump administration is using the diplomats' injury to undo recent progress in improving relationships. Later, the Cuban government offered to work with American authorities on a probe, but America denied. Regardless, Cuba tried to investigate the matter itself. It employed roughly 2,000 scientists and law enforcement officers to interview 300 diplomats' neighbors inspect 2 hotels and medically test non-diplomats who might have been exposed. According to Cuban officials, they studied air and soil samples as well as a variety of harmful chemicals. They looked into potential that electromagnetic waves were to blame as well as the possibility of insects, but discovered nothing that might be linked to reported medical complaints. And at the same time, America was conducting its own investigation and deploying psychologists, scientists to Cuba. But then something weird happened. Another case of Havana syndrome was reported, but not in Cuba. It was reported in China. In April 2018, the syndromes of the condition struck a foreign service officer in Guangzhou embassy. This was the first case of Havana syndrome outside Havana. After this, 2 more cases of Havana syndrome were reported from the same Guangzhou embassy in China. And then the employees of the most powerful building in the world started experiencing Havana syndrome. And yes, I am talking about the White House. Few employees from different departments reported the illness. More than 250 cases of this sickness have been confirmed, and the majority involving US officials, about 50 affecting CIA officers, and the rest generally affecting US military personnel, State Department personnel and their families. Cases of Havana syndrome were also found in countries like Russia, Poland, Taiwan and few more. But as I said, the targets were US embassy staff in each of these countries. And now few fresh cases are coming out of the den of spies, aka Vienna. The city is home to many large international organizations and embassies. The US embassy in Vienna and the staff apartments are highly secured, and the street in front of them has been closed for security reasons. But it was not enough to prevent the outbreak. The first suspected incident of the illness was identified in Vienna a few months after Biden's inauguration. But the Biden administration chose not to disclose the outbreak until now, when the situation is out of hands. New cases are coming one after the other. There are several possible causes for the syndrome, but most experts agree that it might be a mechanical device that emits ultrasonic or microwave energy. Microbubbles could form within a person's ear as a result of radio frequency energy exposure. When those bubbles travel through the bloodstream into the brain, they can generate minute air particles which cause cell damage. Similar to decompression sickness, a condition experienced by deep sea divers. Another view is that the syndromes are caused by direct radio frequency waves penetrating the skull, disrupting chemical activities in the brain and rewiring neural connections. I know it's getting very tough, but this rewiring could explain why the syndrome appear to have long-term consequences. And the US government probe, which is led by the former member of Osama bin Laden's assassination team, has several theories to investigate. But according to a lot of media reports, the CIA thinks that the Russia or Chinese are behind it. The Russian perspective is really strong because the Havana syndrome emerged in 2016 just as the relationship between Cuba and the United States were improving, and Russia did not want that to happen. So they might have used the Havana syndrome to create tension between US and Cuba. And Russia has a history of using biological weapons and microwaves against different countries and their representatives. John Sipon, a former CIA official who worked in Russia, says Russian security forces used to flood the US embassy in Moscow with concentrated microwaves and electronic pulses. According to him, Russia has vehicles that drive around and target specific individuals. According to the US intelligence mobile data tracking, Russian spies were in close proximity to CIA agents in the regions where Havana syndrome was discovered. But all of this are reports from multiple sources. CIA director did say that they are investigating the Russian angle. However, the US has not formally charged Russia, maybe because there are no solid evidence at this time. But with the COVID-19 lab theory and the Havana virus, we can say that the upcoming threat to humanity and the new weapon in modern warfare might be manufactured disease.